What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of In the Heyday. I'm your host, Oliver Hayes. I'm here at the CU Event Center giving my live reactions to the Colorado Buffaloes 102-97 overtime win over the Eastern Washington Eagles. Of course, in the second game of the year, especially after only winning by 6 points, the Big Sky opponent, Montana State, in the season opener. This is not the result that the Buffs would have wanted, but a win is a win. And yeah, that's all they can ask for. But looking at why this game was so close, why it went to overtime, it started on the defensive side once again for the Buffs, and it wasn't just the interior who gave up 24 points to Patrick McMahon and allowed 38 points in the point. It was the guard play as well, as Isaiah Moses, Eastern Washington guard, went for 30 points for the third time in his collegiate career, the first time this season, of course, being only 3 games in, but he went for 30 points on 12-21 shooting from the field. He went 3 of 5 from deep, went to the free throw line a few times, and his third three, his final one of the game, was super important, most important shot of the day, a game-tying three at the end of regulation, at the end of a super wonky possession that forced overtime against the Buffs, and the Buffs were able to pull it out. But seeing what Moses was able to do, it was very tough to see the defense from the guards, from Barrington Hargress, from Isaiah Johnson, from Felix Casares, from Jalen Hall, from Josiah Sanders, all the guys who got a crack at guarding Moses in this contest. It was not, too insight, and it wasn't too inspiring to see a backcourt in a guard room who has been talked about their athletic ability and their length, their ability to defend, to give up such a solid individual performance, especially because Moses was creating a lot off the bounce. Guys weren't able to stay in front of him. Moses was able to get to the rim and make some tough finishes, but he's also able to hit those 3 threes, which came off some tough shots. So part of it was him making some tough makes, but a lot of it was just simple when it came to the lack of pride, the lack of ability to stay in front of Moses. And, with Moses leading the offense, he has a 32.2% usage rate entering this game. I don't know exactly what it is after this contest, but with as much of the offense coming on his shoulders and him finally being able to hit shots, of course, that created looks for the rest of the Eastern Washington Eagles, and that's why they were able to shoot almost 60% from the field, which is almost unheard of. I'm not sure if I've ever covered a game where an opponent has come into the CU Event Center and shot 60% from the field or better, maybe Kansas or something like that. But Moses, he was able to dish the ball. He had, let's see, how many assists did he finish with? 5 assists to just 2 turnovers. He was able to move the ball and created open looks. The Eagles shot 9 of 16 from deep. Specifically, Emmett Marcotte, a returner, the only returning starter, hit 3 threes in the second half as the Eagles were storming ahead, looking to get an upset. But beyond Moses, Alton Hamilton, the fourth, a big off the bench. He had 18 points on 6 of 11 shooting, went to the line for 7 free throws and made 6 of them. And the Eagles had 42 points in the paint. So it's not like the interior defense did too much better, especially against a smaller interior than what Montana State had on Monday night. I thought that Bengal Dak did a little bit better, especially with help from Elijah Malone. I thought that Sebastian Rancik looked a lot better on the defensive side of things, especially not having to guard McMahon, who was the brunt of Montana State's offense. However, that then put the spotlight onto CU's guards on the defensive side, which exposed them for their inability to guard the ball, as Moses went for 30 points and was able to dish assists. So the Buffs defense struggled a ton. A lot of it comes down to the pride, like I said, but with that, part of it was the foul trouble. Felix Casares, who's arguably the Buffs' best on-ball defender and who ended up picking up Moses a lot down the stretch, ended up falling out of this game in overtime. 2 of those fouls were tough calls. His first foul and his 5th foul were 2 iffy charge calls on opposite ends of the floor. But still, he picked up 2 fouls early nonetheless, and that put him on the bench. And the Buffs then, were down their best defender, the guy who they looked to put on Moses to start this game, and it allowed Moses to get going. So tough to see the foul trouble from him. Malone picked up a foul early, which forced him to the bench. And while Alone McGailey came in and was efficient, went 4 or 5 from the field, had a solid debut, he ended up picking up 2 fouls in that first half and 4 total, which put him into foul trouble. At times, even in that first half, the Buffs had to rely on just the front court of Rancik and Dak, as Malone and McAley struggled with foul trouble. And so, that hurt the Buffs' depth, especially with those two, Rancik and Dak, dealing with, injuries in this offseason and preseason, hoping to, shake off some of the rustiness. So that was probably the second thing that the Buffs struggled with the most defensively. But third of all, it was just the overall communication. I mean, after my rewatch of the Montana State game, there were multiple times, especially with those speed screens that Montana State ran, where I was like, it isn't necessarily a mobility and agility type of thing in ball screen coverage. It's more the communication, calling out, that there's a second screen coming to set a screen on Elijah Malone or something like that, and maybe not the weak side defender isn't helping over. Today, the Spain screens weren't being run, but there were times where, on Marquette's three threes, I don't believe every one of them was a pick and pop, but at least one of them was a pick and pop. And Tad talked about that, how they were in switch defense when one of those happened. And if you're switching on a pick and pop, that obviously shouldn't allow a 3-pointer. So a lot of it, so it's the pride, it's the foul trouble, but it's the communication as well. And with this young team, that's going to take a second to see who's going to step up when people are trying to find their voices. When these guys are used to being offensive minded and scoring a bunch of points, when that ball isn't falling, when that shot isn't falling, how can they step up on the defensive end and lock in and not commit fouls? How can they push out the refs, especially when the refs had quite a role in this one tonight. Before I get into the Buffs' offensive side of things, which helped them win the game, and I'll get into the extra possessions that they created that helped them win the game. The big play of this game didn't even happen on the floor. In overtime, the Buffs they were able to force a steal, which was huge. Isaiah Johnson got fouled by starting forward Stratton Rogers for the Eagles, but Rogers, so I believe, would have fouled out on that play. I mean, I'd have to watch it back. I only saw it once with my live eyes, but he blew up on the ref, and apparently Isaiah Johnson must have gotten into him with a little bit, picking up a technical as well. But with Isaiah picking up that tech, Rogers got his second tee in the span of 1 minute, getting ejected from the game, giving the Bucks 4 free throws in overtime to help win this one. That speaks to how much the refs were involved, how much officiating was involved in this contest, beyond just the foul trouble. But looking at the Buffs, offense, once again productive. The big thing that stood out to me was the fact that they struggled a little bit against Eastern Washington zone. They knew that it was coming, especially with Eastern Washington not being the tallest. But at points, especially in the second half, dealing with foul trouble, the Buffs weren't necessarily able to get as many paint touches as they would have liked. They were kind of moving the ball around the perimeter. And the offense became, somewhat stagnant at points. There were times where I wish that the ball moved and it led to a drive. And, but that was really the only negative thing that I could say about this Buffs offense for the most part. The Buffs were pushing the pace. That's why they were able to get another 39 free throws tonight, even though they just made 27 of them. They pushed the ball, and that's where they got the majority of their offense. And not only were they pushing the ball after turnovers, they forced 12 turnovers. They were able to capitalize on those, helping create those extra field goal attempts, which helped them win this game. But they were pushing the ball after makes. They were pushing the ball after misses, applying pressure on the Eagles' defense, which, like I said, led to those 39 free throws. Sebastian Rancik, Barrington Hargress, and Isaiah Johnson were the three who were able to do that the most. As Sebi went for a career-high 24 points, went 11 of 12 from the free throw line. Also, 3 of 8 from deep as he made 3 3-pointers. But Isaiah Johnson, he pushed the pace, went 6 of 6 from the field, 4-8 from the or 6 of 6 from the free throw line, 4-8 from the field, 3 of 6 from deep. And Barrington Hargress, he only went to the line once, but 6 of 10 from the field. And he was the one who gets the ball out and pushes the pace and helps get a lot of those assists. The Bucks has 16 assists, 10 turnovers. Those 3 guys help get the ball up the floor, and Barrington is the one. Those get the ball into Isaiah's hands, get the ball into Sebi's hands, which leads to those quick baskets and transition. So that was probably the best thing that I saw on the offensive side of things. But with pushing the pace, came and Eastern Washington falling into his own. Those 2 things, the good and the bad, came the emergence of the Buffs 3 ball. It's something that I expected the Buffs to be better at in the season opener. Even though they only should. Excuse me, I'm talking way too fast. I expected the Buffs to be better at shooting the 3-pointer in the season opener, but they only shot 3-12. The reason I expected them to shoot better from deep is because at least 7 guys across the 3 scrimmages that I had witnessed this offseason and preseason had hit 3 3-pointers, including 9 in the inter-squad scrimmage. So the Buffs, they obviously have guys who can shoot the ball. They have multiple guys who can shoot the ball, and so when the Buffs went 3 of 12 in that season opener, I was a little surprised. They shot 11 of 23 from beyond the arc. A lot of that was because Eastern Washington went to that zone. And so even though CU wasn't necessarily able to drive as much in the half court, they were able to capitalize on the extra 3-point looks that they were getting. And some of those were, and I think the good thing too is that, they were inside out looks. Some of them came from Elijah Malone. He only had 2 assists, but, there were twice where he got the ball inside. The dribble came, he kicked it out. I was able to find an open guy for a 3-pointer who knocked it down. Elijah Malone, was a guy who had a three. He had a three in overtime, the dagger, to put the Buffs up 96-90, and officially set them apart with a minute left in this contest. And just overall, Hargress was able to get paint touches. Some other guys were able to get paint touches, like Sebi. He had 4 assists alongside Hargress, 4 assists. And so the Buffs, while they shot the ball well, they were able to kick out and get those inside out looks, which was huge. And definitely something that they weren't able to capitalize on as much against Montana State. For the most part, against Montana State, they were just able to make those drives to the rim, get fouled, score a layup, whatever it was. So to see the inside-out looks be generated, but then to not only do that, but to capitalize on them after only shooting 25% from the field in the season opener was, great to see. But beyond that, I mean, Alone Mikaeli, he was one of the guys to look out for, having his collegiate debut. His official stat line: 15 minutes, 57 seconds played, 4-5 from the field, 3-6 from the line, 3 rebounds, 11 points, zeros across the rest of the board. He had 4 fouls, got into foul trouble, had a -3 plus minus as he struggled with that foul trouble. But he was efficient on the offensive side of things, so definitely helped the offense. And defensively, he was helpful here and there, at least adding depth, and keeping the Buffs out of foul trouble, potentially with Rancik and Dak. There were times where he got bullied a little bit in the post, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do, because his 6'9" frame, while not being the most athletic, makes him versatile. But it kind of can put him in a weird spot. Guys who are bigger than him can potentially bully him. Guys who are smaller can potentially beat him off the bounce on the ground. So he's playing with a sprained ankle, but overall I saw solid things from him, especially on the offensive end. But then I guess one thing I skipped over was the offensive rebounding. I talked about the Buffs creating extra field goal attempts. They only had one more field goal attempt, but they shot 20 more free throws than the Eagles. So while the Buffs shot almost 10% less from the field goal from the floor than the Eagles, they were just able to create so many extra looks, at least from the free throw line, that it just didn't matter. The Buffs were able to force those turnovers, force 12 turnovers by applying the ball pressure, even though the defense wasn't the greatest as far as forcing misses. But then on top of that, even when they were missing shots, they were able to grab offensive rebounds. It wasn't the individual offensive rebounding that was on Monday night with Elijah Malone's 8 boards, but a more well-rounded performance, as no guy had more than 2, but Buffs still had 11 offensive rebounds and had 11 second chance points in this contest, and we're able to get those multiple free throw looks, get an extra field goal attempt. And so like I said, even though they didn't have the same amount of success scoring the ball in terms of efficiency, they were able to get those extra looks due to the offensive rebounding, due to extra field goal attempts. So I'd say this is an odd game to kind of talk about, because offensively, the Buffs did what they needed to do. On the glass, I felt like the Buffs did what they needed to do, but defensively was just so darn negative that you just can't ignore it. And it's not only just after the season opener, it seemed like, oh, maybe it was just the interior with injury troubles, with Alone being out, with Rancik and Dak coming back from their the knee and ankle issues. Then today with Isaiah Moses, 30 points, like I said, shone a light on the guards, and kind of exposed what can happen, especially if a guy like Felix Sasaris is getting in foul trouble. So yeah, I mean, I'd say more bitter than sweet in this one, but obviously some optimism, especially of the Buffs. The Buffs only had 10 turnovers in this one, another breath of fresh air. And at least another example of how the Buffs may be able to take better care of the ball this season after the down year from last. But yeah, I mean, outside of I talked about Rancik, I talked about Hargress, I talked about Johnson, talked about Malone, Mikaeli, talked about Dak. I mean, I talked about pretty much all the guys. It was only the freshmen I hadn't really talked about, outside of Johnson, Mikaeli, Josiah Sanders, Ian Inman, and Jalen Holland. Those guys all played solid. Ian Inman probably had the funniest showing, just because he didn't even play 4 minutes, but he went 3 of 4 from the field, hit 2 threes on back-to-back possessions, and hit a shot at the end of the first half to beat the buzzer, to put the Buffs up 2 and into the break. So Ian Inman was fun on the offensive side of the ball, even though he didn't even log 4 minutes. But Josiah Sanders, he brings the energy on the defensive side of the ball. He helped pick up Moses a little bit. He had some offensive rebounds himself, and Jalen Holland had a fairly similar role. Both those two have slightly different styles. Sanders is more energetic, just constantly going, bringing the energy, while Holland is a little bit more locked in, a little bit more kind of tough nose. But they're figuring out their roles. They're figuring out how they can impact the game, and they did so tonight, especially as Felix struggled trying to find time on the floor, playing less minutes than those guys due to his foul trouble. But yeah, at this point, I'm kind of rambling. I'll definitely have some more cohesive thoughts after I'm able to give this one a rewatch, and hopefully I'll be able to kind of pick and point at, why these things were happening. I think it's probably a little bit more than just, these guys aren't taking enough pride on defense or something like that. I think, there may be a little bit deeper, when it comes to coverage, when it comes to things like that. Potentially seeing, in ball screen coverage, whose fault is it? Is the guard not getting through a screen? Is it a big not being as versatile? Are they completely abandoning what they're supposed to do in the defense? Like Tad talked about with the switch on the pick and pops. There's a multitude of issues, and I don't think I'm excited to see what they are, but I'm excited to have some more cohesive thoughts to bring you guys, and hopefully some better takeaways, especially with the Buffs, having a handful of days before Providence comes to town and really shows them a high major opponent, a Big East opponent, on their home floor. I believe 5 days from now, but I'd have to confirm that exactly. Either way, I think this is enough for now. That was most of my live reactions, most of my takeaways. But I appreciate you guys listening to another episode of In the Heyday. I'm your host, Oliver Hayes, and I'll catch you guys later.